The following is a paid presentation brought to you by Amazing Facts Incorporated. Coming up next on Amazing Facts Presents...
In the battle between good and evil, God can only use truth. The devil can use any combination of truth or error.
For over 40 years, Amazing Facts has been dedicated to sharing God's Word through media. This program features highlights from some of our best television broadcasts. We invite you to sit back and enjoy this edition of Amazing Facts Presents. Today's presentation is an excerpt from the Millennium of Prophecy video series.
Our story tonight is found in the first book of Samuel. It's actually 2 Samuel, dealing with a young man by the name of Absalom. The name Absalom means Abba Shalom, or son of peace. Remember I told you Shalom, of course, means peace in Hebrew. Jerusalem, a city of peace. Absalom had a really good name. Now, David had many sons. Absalom was the second born, but he was very striking. Had a handsome father in King David, and his mother was a princess, beautiful mother. And the Bible tells us that from the crown of his head to the sole of the foot, there was absolutely no blemish in Absalom. He was a beautiful person. He got 50 chariots. No, I'm sorry, he got 50 men to run before him as he had a chariot, and so that he could start to get some prestige. He killed his older brother Amnon, who was in line to rule, so he would be next in line. And then it tells us that he did a little bit of political campaigning. And he went, and the people who were coming to the city of Jerusalem to have judgment from King David, Absalom would intercept them. And he'd say, you know, David's awful busy now, and he's depressed, he's had some problems in the kingdom, but you know, if I was in charge, I'd take care of you, and I would give you justice. And they'd bow down before him to worship him, but he'd lift them up and he'd hug them. And he was so handsome and winsome. The Bible tells us he stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Finally, it broke into an open revolt. He, unprovoked, rebelled against his own father, trying to kill good King David, his own father, and take the throne by force. He wanted the power. He wanted to be king. Well, David's loyal men, his soldiers that had fought with him for many years, they stayed with him as David fled from Jerusalem. And eventually Absalom and David's soldiers were engaged in battle, and David's men were well seasoned, even though they were greatly outnumbered. Pretty soon Absalom's forces were overwhelmed and fleeing for their lives. And as Absalom rode through a thick forest on his royal white mule, it says he met the servants of David, and he rode on a mule, and the mule went under the thick boughs of a great terebinth tree. It's like an oak. And his head caught in the terebinth, so he was left hanging between heaven and earth. And at that point, mule ran out, and there he was hanging. And he hung there for a little while until pretty soon David's soldiers found him. They plunged 3 spears into his heart, 3 darts, and he was executed. They then took Absalom and they placed him in a great pit in the ground, covered him with stones, that he would not have a marked grave and nobody would remember him, because everyone was so disgusted with what he had done against David, who had done nothing wrong. David loved Absalom. And as we go on later with our story, you'll find out how it wounded David when he found out that his son was dead. We need to go on now with question number 1 in our lesson. You know, I think it's interesting that the most common call that the police receive are called domestic calls. Fights in families. You know, during the Gulf War, I understand that more American soldiers were killed by what's called friendly fire than by the Iraqi enemies. And it's still true today that family feuds and friendly fire and domestic problems seem to fill the headlines. In the Bible, you can read story after story where the problems of God's people often came from within more than without. Jesus was betrayed by Judas to his own people. Joseph was sold by his own brothers, and even David ran from his own king, Saul. All through the Bible, you find out about these family problems that sometimes became very serious. There was a family feud in heaven. And that's where the whole problem with sin and Satan and this battle, this great cosmic conflict between good and evil, originated. Question number 1. What was the name of the rebellious prince in heaven, and why did he rebel? Answer, Isaiah 14, verse 12. Say the answers with me. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Now, Lucifer is a name we typically think of for the devil. It's a good name. It's a name that he had from God. It was his original name before he fell. That's where you get the word like luminescence, lucite. It means illumination. But that was his name back then. Then you look at Isaiah 14, verse 13 and 14. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will be like the Most High. And you go on and read that passage. He says, I. 5 times. You know, I understand people in mental asylums use the words I, me, my, mine, and myself 10 times more than people who are sane. Selfishness is synonymous with sin, and it's a form of insanity. Lucifer became preoccupied with his position and what he wanted to do. Next part of the answer, Ezekiel 28, verse 17. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. He was a brilliant creature, a beautiful creature, like Absalom, no blemish. He was the highest of God's angels, the leader of the angels, leader of the heavenly choir. God made him perfect, and you're thinking, no, wait, Doug, something must have been wrong with the wiring. We'll get to that in just a minute, but I want you to know that Lucifer was a beautiful and a good angel. And if you knew him back then as he came from the hands of the Creator, you would have liked him too. A lot of people like him today the way he is now, and that's too bad, especially around Halloween. But he was a beautiful creature, and he became preoccupied with his own charisma, his own beauty. And it went to his head the adoration the other angels gave him. And you know, compliments are nice, but you can take it too far where it's not healthy. You know, in Proverbs it says, do not set a net before your neighbor's feet with flattery. You can make a person stumble. Now, I have a theory that everybody can be beautiful. I really believe that. I believe everybody can be beautiful. A lot of us are insecure about our appearance. I refuse to get a toupee. I'm not going to do that. No way. I feel absolutely normal like this. This is not a birth defect. But a lot of people are very insecure about their appearance. And I think part of the, and I'm not criticizing those of you who might respectfully disagree with my point on that, but because of Hollywood and because of the movies and the film industry and the magazines, 1 out of 1,000 people is strikingly beautiful. But they take those people and they photograph them and they multiply the pictures and they put them on the camera and they put them on the screen and everybody sees them, and we start feeling insecure if we don't all look like these perfect Barbie dolls. Most of us kind of look okie dokie, you know, we're okay, but people are insecure about their appearance. Well, I heard a pastor say something one time. He said there's 4 kinds of people. He said you get some people who are beautiful ugly. And what he meant by that was that there are some people who maybe have a homely, average appearance, but they're beautiful on the inside. They've got a winning disposition and a quick smile, and people are attracted to them, and they're positive. They're beautiful people. Then you've got people who are ugly, beautiful. They, of course, are some of the people who might have a really nice appearance on the outside, but they're so self-absorbed and vain, they know it, and they're preoccupied with their appearance. You know, you might want to be seen with them, but you wouldn't want to be married to them, because they can become very difficult people. What do you think? I knew this one girl one time, very attractive girl, and every time I saw her, she was reading Glamour magazine. Whenever she'd walk by a store window, she's always checking herself in the window. It was a sickness, really. It was very sad. Preoccupied, because you know what? That doesn't last, as we all discover eventually. Then you've got people who are the best. They're the beautiful, beautiful. Very rare people who are beautiful on the outside and beautiful on the inside. Incidentally, do you know that Solomon says in Proverbs that a beautiful woman without discretion or a beautiful heart is like a jewel of gold in a pig's nose. In other words, it's wasted beauty. But some people are beautiful on the outside and beautiful on the inside. And you realize, of course, there's no excuse for anybody to be in that fourth category, which is ugly, ugly. Right? Okay. All right, where am I? Number 2. Did God make a devil when he created Lucifer? No. God made a beautiful angel. The answer is Ezekiel 28, verse 15. Thou wast perfect in the day that thou wast created, until iniquity was found in thee. God made a perfect angel. Now, I need to stop right here and clear up a very popular misconception. And that is this notion that the devil, Satan, is this grotesque, hideous beast. Now, if I were to tell you right now, all right, everybody, close your eyes. You've got a mental screen. I want you to envision the devil for a second. Don't do it too long. What do you see? Most people see, what color is his leotards? Red leotards. See, you all know that. Red leotards, and does he have a goatee? Yeah, you know, I used to have a goatee, and I was doing these meetings, and people said, you look like the devil. I shaved in a big hurry, because even though there's nothing that says the devil has a goatee, it was just a bad stumbling block for some people. And he's got the horns, and he's got the bat wings, and the hooves, and he's got the pitchfork, so he can make sure people are evenly cooked in hell, and or prod people along, you know. And all these images that we've got about the devil, he wants you to think that's how he looks, but that's not what we find in the Bible. One thing I want you to know is it's not a joke. You need to understand that he was a beautiful and a glorious angel, very attractive. He wants people to think that he's grotesque. But in fact, he was the most beautiful of the angels, and he still retains a great percentage of that beauty. Question number 3. What finally happened? Well, you can read it in your Bibles. Revelation chapter 12, verse 7. It's hard to believe. It says, there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels. Someone write down a question and send it in. Who is Michael? Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. Now, I think you know who the dragon is. It tells you right there in Revelation 12. That old serpent called the devil and Satan. That's who the dragon is. You don't have to guess. There was some cosmic conflict. I don't know what the weapons were, but eventually Lucifer incited an all-out rebellion against God's government. You see, the way we piece it together from the few scriptures that you find in the Bible is Lucifer wanted God's position. He, somewhere within himself, began to think, how come I am not part of the inner circle of the Father, Son, and Spirit? How come I don't have the creative powers? I mean, I'm just underneath God. Why can't I make that one little step and transition from being a created creature to being divine? And the more he thought about this, he began to covet the position that God held, until he began to circulate among the other angels and start to plant seeds of doubt about God's government. You know, have you noticed that God made us where he's in charge and we never get a chance to be God? He says, I set the rules and you just obey. And little by little, subtly, he did what Absalom did. He campaigned behind the scenes in an insidious way until he began to ferment among the angels distrust of God. Now, you might be thinking, how could angels fall for that? Follow me, friends. Up to this point in the universe, there had never, ever been a lie. If you've never heard a lie, you know, I remember some of the immigrants who came to New York City. Some of the con artists were selling them the Brooklyn Bridge. You all know that joke. It really did supposedly happen. I've got a title to the Brooklyn Bridge. I can't take care of it anymore. Here, you want to buy it? $50. And these people growing up in godly families, very sincere, said, oh, just tell him he's got the Brooklyn Bridge. And they fell for it because they were used to honesty. The angels had not been accustomed to resisting deception. So many of them believed it, until it finally broke into an all-out war in heaven, and Satan and his followers who were rejected were evicted, you might say. Number 4, what powerful beings work under the devil's command? Answer is found in Revelation 12, verse 4. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. Revelation 12:9 tells us, the second part of the answer, he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now, we hear about ghosts and we hear about demons, but you know what they actually are. They are the representatives of the devil who fell, fallen angels. You've heard the expression before, The devil made me do it. I was tempted and the devil made me do it. You know what I'm talking about? Quite frankly, the devil cannot make you sin unless you are demon-possessed. God gives us a free choice. We must choose to sin. And most of the time when we are tempted, it's not the devil tempting us. It's actually Satan's representatives, demons, fallen angels. God has guardian angels. I believe very much in angels. They're in this room right now, God's angels. I think the devil's got angels probably trying to distract people, and before each meeting I pray that God's angels will evict the devil's angels so that you'll hear what I'm saying to you. And those of you watching at home, it's still true. The devil is constantly battling with his forces to win over God's children. I'll get to the reason for that in a minute. Some of you might be thinking, well, obviously, Doug, since God is perfect and God knows all things, God must have deliberately wired Lucifer wrong when the chip came out of his factory or something like that, and there was, God made a mistake. People say that. And Lucifer, God knew what was going to happen. Why didn't he just, you say, you know, quality control, we made a mistake, send him back? Why did he allow him to carry out those selfish thoughts of rebellion? Let me establish something that is critical to your understanding the great controversy in the Bible between good and evil. God is love.
Amen.
He wants us to love him. Amen. Love must be freely given.
Amen.
It cannot be compelled. That means God creates all of his intelligent creatures with the greatest of gifts. It's called choice. You have a free will. Now, if you're like me, you want love. How many of you want love? That's normal. If you didn't raise your hand, I don't believe you. Everybody wants to be loved. I like to be loved. And so I've come to a solution. I'm going to see if I can patent this and sell it down there on the streets in front of 34th Street, how we can all have our self-esteem elevated.
Good evening, Doug.
Good evening, tape player.
How are you feeling this fine evening?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm feeling rather peppy. I have new batteries.
Congratulations.
Doug, I need to tell you something.
We're all listening.
I love you, Doug. No, please listen. I love the way your head shines. I mean, your light shines. You're so kind and wonderful and generous and tall and dark and handsome. I love you, Doug. I love you, Doug. Doug, I love you. I love you, Doug. I love you, Doug.
I love you. I love you, Doug.
I love you, Doug. Doug, I love you. I love you, Doug.
But Doug, I love you. No, wait, I love you. I love you. I love you, Doug.
I feel so much better now. Do you think I really feel better? You know why it doesn't mean anything to me? I made this tape in my image. It's just doing what I told it to do. It's pre-programmed. That's not love, is it? Now, some people are saying if God is all-knowing, how come he took the risk of making a creature with this possibility that he'd rebel? How many of you are parents? Fess up, come on. How many of you got a written guarantee before you procreated that your children would cooperate and never disobey you? Any of you get that written statement? How many of you recognized you were taking a risk that they may not obey? How many of you had no idea and you were shocked later? You thought because I love them so much, they're going to just do everything I tell them to do, right? Ignorance is bliss. You take a risk when you want to love. You have to give freedom. And sometimes love is very painful. Some people get hurt in love and they're afraid to ever love again because you take a risk of getting hurt. God took that risk when he made our world and when he made all the creatures. He wanted us to love him freely. Question number 5. What methods does Satan use in his work of deception? Now, we got several answers here, and I want you at home to say them out loud also. Here we go. Revelation 12:9, Satan which deceiveth the whole world. Now, are you aware the devil has some advantages over God? Yeah. In the battle between good and evil, God can only use truth. The devil can use any combination of truth or error. He can mix them up any way he wants. As a matter of fact, the reason there are so many different churches and so much religious confusion in the world is because I believe all churches have different percentages of truth. That's what makes them attractive. If you're going fishing You find out what the fish like, and you take their favorite fillet or their favorite food, and you put it in the water with a hook in it. Hook doesn't have to be very big, but you give them something perfectly healthy without the hook. If I were to say, look, I've got a glass of water here for you. It is pure water, store-bought, sealed water. I've just added one little drop, 1% strychnine. Help yourself. And it's 99% good, but what does that 1% poison do? Makes the whole thing lethal. And the devil knows that principle, and that's why there's so much religious confusion in the world. So he deceives. And the Bible says he's deceiving the whole world. A lot of the world is deceived about the devil. They're distracted. Well, all right, I better keep going here. Answer B, Mark chapter 1, verse 13. Jesus was there in the wilderness 40 days, tempted of Satan. Christ was tempted by the devil. Incidentally, is it a sin to be tempted? No. Jesus was tempted. Matter of fact, some of you think, oh, I'm never tempted. If you tell me you're never tempted, you're in big trouble. That means you're making no effort to resist. You're just bobbing on downstream on your way to destruction, and you say, this is great, I don't get tempted. But if you try to resist the devil and you're swimming upstream against the current, you're going to feel the battle raging. Matter of fact, one of the first things that happens when a person makes an effort to do God's will is they feel resistance. It's because they've just been floating on their way down to the precipice of eternity. This is great, no resistance. Actually, it isn't great. I've been on that river before. Answer C, Revelation 16:14, for they are the spirits of devils working miracles. One of the ways that Satan deceives, he uses miracles. Can you remember a story in the Bible where Moses went before the Pharaoh and Pharaoh said, prove that you've come from God. And he took his rod, he threw it down, it turned into a serpent. Pharaoh clapped his hands and out came his magicians and they threw down their staffs, their rods, and they turned into serpents too. Can the devil do miracles, work signs and wonders? Are we to believe because some religion or some ministry says, but we heal, we do miracles, it must be from God? Can the devil counterfeit miracles? Yes. So we need to be very careful not to make that the criteria. When you read on in Revelation, you're going to find it says that the devil does great wonders so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men to deceive them. The diabolical miracles will increase as time goes on. So you're going to have to go by what the Bible says and not by what your senses tell you. Furthermore, we read about the devil, Revelation chapter 12 verse 10 rather. It says, he is the accuser of our brethren who is cast down, which accuse them before our God day and night. If you've read the story of Job, the devil comes before the Lord and accuses Job. So, the only reason he obeys you is you're protecting him. Take away your protection. You read in the book of Zechariah how the devil accuses Joshua the high priest. And you know, the devil is so rotten. He will tell you to do something wrong, and then he will turn you in for doing it. I had some friends in school used to do that. He said, I dare you to go kick the emblem off the teacher's car. I said, I'm not afraid, and I do it. And she'd say, who did this? Doug did it. They'd tell me to do it, and then they'd turn me in. Diabolical. Furthermore, we learn, answer E, that he manipulates. The devil will promise people fame and fortune if they will worship him, but they can't control themselves. They end up becoming addicts and pawns and puppets of the prince of darkness. Now I want to get to answer E. It tells us that he was a murderer from the beginning, for he is a liar and the father of it. Back in the beginning when Cain killed his brother Abel, who do you think inspired that? You know, up until the time of the cross, I think that Satan still had the sympathy of some of the unfallen angels. But at the cross, you could see clearly demonstrated Satan's love for power and Christ's power of love. At the cross, you've got the mob mocking and spitting and crucifying and torturing. And then you've got Jesus saying, Father, forgive them. What a contrast. The power of love and the love for power. And those two forces are battling in the world today. God is using the power of love to try and redeem and save people, and the devil is preoccupying people with the love of power. Number 6, when is the devil the most dangerous? 2 Corinthians 11, verse 14 and 15. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. He looks so good. You know, it's one thing to be frightened of the devil when he's like a lion and jump when he's like a snake, but he's especially insidious when he appears as an angel of light. You can read in Matthew chapter 7, verse 15, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are what? Ravening wolves." And it's always been the case that the devil plants his representatives in among the genuine. He counterfeits the false, and he incorporates it into the true to deceive people. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I'll tell you, friends, Jesus, when we studied the second coming the other night, Christ said, beware. First thing Jesus said when the disciples asked about the last days, the first thing he said, Matthew 24, take heed. Many, many will come in my name, saying I'm Christ, and deceive many. Many false prophets will arise. In other words, there are just oogles and reams of counterfeits floating around out there that are interested in usually promoting themselves.
Stay tuned. Pastor Doug will be right back with this week's special free offer.
Now, are you aware the devil has some advantages over God? In the battle between good and evil, God can only use truth. The devil can use any combination of truth or error. A lot of the world is deceived about the devil. And you know, the devil is so rotten. He will tell you to do something wrong, and then he will turn you in for doing it.
If you've missed any of our Amazing Facts programs, visit our website at amazingfacts.org. There you'll find an archive of all our television and radio programs, including Amazing Facts Presents. One location, so many possibilities. amazingfacts.org.
Hello, friends. I hope that today's presentation has helped you better understand the value that God places on the free will of His creatures. The Lord never forces us to love Him. It must be our choice. Unfortunately, Satan's choice to rebel has initiated all the trouble that we see in the world today. But the Bible tells us that God is actively working to restore the universe to the way that it was before the devil's mutiny. You can live a life of victory over Satan's temptations and be part of God's restored kingdom. We'd like to share more information with you on this topic, so our free gift for you today is a study guide entitled, Did God Create a Devil? And we'll send it to you absolutely free if you just call the number on your screen. Ask for offer number 107, or you can write us at Amazing Facts, offer number 107, P.O. Box 1058, Roseville, California, 95678. Or you can also go to our website, www.amazingfacts.org. Remember the promise of Christ, greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world.
This is your last chance to take advantage of this week's special free offer. There is no cost or obligation. Just call the toll-free number on your screen and be sure to note the offer number when you make your request. The preceding was a paid presentation brought to you by Amazing Facts Incorporated.
Our story tonight is found in the first book of Samuel. It's actually 2 Samuel, dealing with a young man by the name of Absalom. The name Absalom means Abba Shalom, or son of peace. Remember I told you, Shalom, of course, means peace in Hebrew. Jerusalem, a city of peace. Absalom had a really good name. Now, David had many sons. Absalom was the second born, but he was very striking. Had a handsome father in King David, and his mother was a princess, beautiful mother. And the Bible tells us that from the crown of his head to the sole of the foot, there was absolutely no blemish in Absalom. He was a beautiful person. He got 50 chariots. No, I'm sorry, he got 50 men to run until pretty soon David's soldiers found him. They plunged 3 spears into his heart, 3 darts, and he was executed. They then took Absalom and they placed him in a great pit in the ground, covered him with stones, that he would not have a marked grave and nobody would remember him, because everyone was so disgusted with what he had done against David, who had done nothing wrong. David loved Absalom. And as we go on later with our story, you'll find out how it wounded David when he found out that his son was dead. We need to go on now with question number 1 in our lesson. You know, I think it's interesting that the most common call that the police receive are called domestic calls. Fights in families. You know, unprovoked, rebelled against his own father, tried to kill good King David, his own father, and take the throne by force. He wanted the power. He wanted to be king. Well, David's loyal men, his soldiers that had fought with him for many years, they stayed with him as David fled from Jerusalem. And eventually Absalom and David's soldiers were engaged in battle, and David's men were well seasoned, even though they were greatly outnumbered. Pretty soon Absalom's forces were overwhelmed and fleeing for their lives. And as Absalom rode through a thick forest on his royal white mule, it says he met the servants of David, and he rode on a mule, and the mule went under the thick boughs of a great terebinth tree. It's like an oak. And his head caught in the terebinth, so he was left hanging between heaven and earth. And at that point, mule ran out, and there he was hanging. And he hung there for a little while.
The following is a paid presentation brought to you by Amazing Facts Incorporated. Coming up next on Amazing Facts Presents...
In the battle between good and evil, God can only use truth. The devil can use any combination of truth or error.
For over 40 years, Amazing Facts has been dedicated to sharing God's Word through media. This program features highlights from some of our best television broadcasts. We invite you to sit back and enjoy this edition of Amazing Facts Presents. Today's presentation is an excerpt from the Millennium of Prophecy video series.
Before him, as he had a chariot, and so that he could start to get some prestige. He killed his older brother Amnon, who was in line to rule, so he would be next in line. And then it tells us that he did a little bit of political campaigning. And he went, and the people who were coming to the city of Jerusalem to have judgment from King David, Absalom would intercept them. And he'd say, you know, David's awful busy now, and he's depressed, he's had some problems in the kingdom, but you know, if I was in charge, I'd take care of you, and I would give you justice. And they'd bow down before him to worship him, but he'd lift them up and he'd hug them. And he was so handsome and winsome. The Bible tells us he stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Finally, it broke into an open revolt. He